Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tim Bonstetten, Senior Assistant Director for Regional Engagement and Professional Network Initiatives here at William & Mary. I'm excited to welcome you to today's panel discussion focused on the higher education response to COVID-19, showcasing leaders from several of the many universities and institutions here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Before we begin, we know that this time has been difficult on so many levels. We are all impacted by the pandemic, and we're all impacted by the murder of George Floyd, the latest among many senseless deaths. As we come together as an alumni community, we want to take a moment to stand steadfast with all of those facing racial injustice, especially our Black and Brown friends, and with all of those who have experienced loss related to COVID-19. Please join me for a moment of silence as we reflect on those issues and ponder ways we can make a difference moving forward. Thank you. Now, I would like to highlight a few of our upcoming events here with the William & Mary Alumni Association. And to learn more about these events and to register for them, please visit wmalumni.com. Tomorrow at 4 o'clock, Dr. Daniel Griffin, who's a current parent of a William & Mary student, will be speaking about COVID-19 and the pandemic from a doctor's point of view. On Thursday evening, our William & Mary LGBTQ alumni will be hosting a virtual Pride celebration in recognition of June, which is Pride Month. And on Friday, June 12th, 2 William & Mary alumni will be speaking about working with older family members, neighbors, and friends in categorizing and getting the stories and keeping those for the future. And I'd also like to speak about William & Mary Switchboard as well, which is a way for William & Mary alumni to connect and ask and offer things that they can give to others. And this includes internships, externships, job opportunities, and more. And to register for a William & Mary Switchboard account, please use the link below, wm.switchboardhq.com. Now, today's event is sponsored by the William & Mary Alumni Association. We'll be recording the conversation and we'll notify all registrants once it's online. Questions are encouraged throughout, and we'll answer any of the questions that come up as time allows. If you roll to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A icon. To submit your questions, please click that button and our moderator will select them as time allows. Now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce the moderator for today's discussion, Ken Kipps. After graduating from William & Mary in 1984, Ken began his public relations career in Williamsburg. More than 25 years ago, he came to the University of Virginia, where he has held a series of roles in communications, fundraising, foundation governance, and academic administration. Today, as Vice President of Administration at the university's College Foundation, he handles operations for 10 national and regional foundation fundraising boards. And with that, I will turn things over to Ken and take away our screen share. All right, Ken, take it away.
Thanks, Tim. These are difficult times in many ways. And today we're going to focus on one challenge in particular, the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on higher education. Our panelists bring a great range of views to this question, and I'm actually really eager to hear their insights over the next hour. So to start off, I'd like each of the panelists to summarize their roles, to give us a brief refresher on their schools, and to let us know what has been planned for the fall. Beth, would you please go first, and then Maegan, Allison, and Matthew.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Beth Clarke. I'm the Senior Executive Director of Admissions at Briar College. Briar is a women's college with about 350 students, located about 25 minutes north of the Lynchburg area. And you may have heard about our rise from the ashes in 2015, and excited to say that Briar is thriving now and has a really innovative plan for handling COVID-19 for next year. We have announced that we will be open starting in early August, so we're going to have students come back for an early start. And we will then dismiss at Thanksgiving time and not have students return for the remainder of the fall semester. And we're hearing that this is a trend for a lot of institutions across the country to be making, I think, that really strong decision. I'm also excited to share that I'll be the new VP for enrollment at Millsaps College starting July 1st. And I've been very thankful for my time here at Sweetbriar and learning and preparing me for that next role at Millsaps.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for spending some of your time with us. I was honored to be asked to be on this panel. My name is Maegan Fallen. I am the director of the Career Development Center at Randolph College, which is also in the Lynchburg area. Randolph is a small liberal arts college, about 700 undergraduate students. And you may be more familiar with our former name, which was Randolph-Macon Women's College, and we went co-ed back in 2007. Our fall plans are much like what Beth mentioned Sweetbriar is doing. We have moved our semester start date up a week, so we're starting earlier in August, and we will plan to be on campus until Thanksgiving break. And after that, we'll have one more week of remote classes, and our exams will also be remote again.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Allison Jablonski, and I am the Provost and VP for Academic Affairs at the University of Lynchburg. So we really kind of have Lynchburg well represented here today. University of Lynchburg is a liberal arts school. We have about 2,800 students. Almost 1,000 of those are graduate students. And we have a campus in the heart of Lynchburg. And then also we have a nature center out in Bedford County, almost 500 acres. For the fall, this is going to be a continuing refrain. We are returning as scheduled August 20th for face-to-face. And then we are going to finish the semester prior to Thanksgiving so that our students can travel safely home. We do have a few of our health science programs that are working this summer as a model using our public health plan that is being developed using a lot of precautions. So we have our PA medicine program as well as nursing and another program that's going to be meeting in June and July.
Hi, everyone. I'm Matthew Lambert, and I have the great pleasure of serving as the Vice President for University Advancement at the alma mater of the nation, William & Mary. Unless you fear that everyone here was from the western part of the Commonwealth, we did make sure that Williamsburg was well represented. Many of you know, but William & Mary is right around 8,000 students, about 6,000 undergraduate and 2,000 graduate students. And we are still finalizing plans for the fall, very similar to what everyone has said here, the kinds of plans we're talking about. Our intention is to come back in person in August. And I think we're all conscious that we're likely to have to move into mixed modalities throughout the fall and into the winter, but our intention is to come back and have in-person classes. Ken, back to you.
Thank you, panelists. And so I'm from the University of Virginia. We have about 24,000 students, of which about 2/3 are undergrads, 3,000 full-time faculty, and 14,000 full-time staff. UVA is a public university that receives more money from private philanthropic support than it gets from the state. Last week, our president announced his intention to open on schedule for next fall, likely with a mix of in-person and remote instruction until the Thanksgiving break, after which students would not return to grounds for the remainder of the semester. There's still a number of questions about how that's all going to work, and the intent is to announce that later this month. So for those of you participating today, I'm going to begin a conversation with the panelists, and I'd like you to feel free to submit questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I'll get to as many of those as we can before the hour is up. So panelists, let's start with the long-term lessons from half a semester of being remote. What are the big takeaways for the part of the institution where you work, especially in terms of things that went well and might become part of your playbook when we once again are back on our campuses? Let's take this one in the same order as the life cycle of our constituents, so from applicants all the way through to alumni. So Beth, I'm going to start with you. How did the admissions function at Sweet Briar adapt to the stay-at-home orders that came at the peak of yield season, when you would normally have prospective students on grounds? And what do you see carrying forward once the crisis ebbs?
Well, it was a crazy pivot that we had to do, because the entire focus of our recruitment efforts this spring had been bringing students to campus. We had been flying in any student who wanted to see our 3,250 acre campus. We had done lots of research, and all the research showed that we were more likely to have a student matriculate to Sweet Briar if we were to have them interact with our faculty and staff on the grounds. So when we could no longer do that, we really did have to pivot. And the first thing we looked at was how we could replicate the experience virtually or remotely. And the best way we found to do that was through some resources we were already using. We have a partnership with UVisit. It's part of EAB, and they have a virtual tour that we host on our website. And we thought, well, this tour, while it showcases the buildings, it doesn't show the personality and the heart of the campus community. So how can we bring that into that experience? And the way we did that was through utilizing students, admissions counselors, faculty, coaches, all the members of our community that we could, to help guide the prospective student and family through the experience of being on campus. So we would have students register just like they would for a typical campus tour, but they would be led through that experience remotely with all those members of our community. And we had some feedback from students and from families saying that they actually felt like they got the full experience, as close as possible to actually stepping foot on campus, because they were talking directly with all those members of our community. And we made sure too that the follow-up with that was very personalized text messaging, continued personal outreach from all members of our community, because that's what we're hearing over and over from students and families, is that in this remote learning environment, that's what they miss. They miss that personal connection. They miss that feeling of community. So all of our efforts have been focused on replicating that community in a remote environment. And it's exciting to see how this could continue after COVID-19. We're already starting to think about hybrid models of how we continue to offer a remote experience while also offering a personal campus experience, particularly when it comes to events as well. We had to hold our entire accepted student event remotely and virtually, and that was an exciting experience to incorporate students with as well. So we're thinking that we can continue to host both an on-campus experience and a virtual one.
Great, thank you. So let's move from admitted students to actual students. So Allison, from what I've been reading, it sounds like most schools mastered that sudden pivot to teaching courses remotely that were designed to be taught in person, and things stayed pretty much on the rails. That said, I'm hearing faculty talk about how they might design a course differently if it were intended to be taught fully or partially online, and how that would feel different than the classes they taught during the second half of this spring semester. I'm curious, what did you all learn at Lynchburg, and how will that inform your instructional strategy for fall and beyond, really?
Well, we kind of went straight to the students. We sent them a survey after the semester had ended and asked, what could we have done better? What did you need and you didn't have? And how can we fill that gap? A lot of the comments were positive and spoke directly to what their instructors had accomplished in the second half of the semester, and either maintained the sense of camaraderie, we're all in this together, or actually strengthened it through the online presence. We did get some feedback about maybe attempting a little too much or not attempting enough. So I think it was some very good feedback. We've also surveyed the faculty in terms of what they need for professional development, and we're already in the throes of creating professional development for those individuals who will be teaching online in the fall or teaching some type of hybrid. Right now, we have a representative group of faculty who are in the trenches looking at how those courses are going to develop for the fall and to give us maximum flexibility in case we have to pivot again. And that's going to be digging in and really looking at professional development opportunities for designing a course online intentionally.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Maegan, okay, what a challenging time for career advising and job searching. With the job market such as it is and summer internships all but dried up, what are you recommending that Randolph students do to weather this downturn? And what are some of those tactics that are likely to be useful in a normal job cycle?
Sure. Yeah, so I was feeling pretty good. Our students were set to enter the strongest economy in many years, and then this happened. So that's okay. So what some of the takeaways that we've had in career development is that or any of our student activities is that we're sort of this auxiliary service to students, and they're spending all of their time this past semester just really in the trenches with their classes, 8 and 10 hours on Zoom calls, and they're exhausted and they don't want to stop by our office and have a conversation like what have occurred on campus. So our office really pivoted this semester, the remainder of the semester, to deliver services that our students were seeking. So we turned to our social media, we turned to things like newsletters and quick blurbs that students didn't have to experience more Zoom fatigue that we keep reading about. As far as this summer, the numbers are pretty dire about internships. A lot of those were rescinded. There has been an uptick now on companies being able to figure out what a remote opportunity looks like for a student where they can still have meaningful work. So that has been encouraging. Otherwise, we've been encouraging students to use this summer to look for remote opportunities. So like I said, a lot of companies are doing that. Some sites like Parker Dewey have popped up where they're helping companies shift their internships to micro internships or more project work, so something that students can accomplish. But then also we're encouraging our students to use this time to build skills. There's lots of certifications, work on their LinkedIn, work on networking. Don't let this time go to waste. And then also telling students to reach out to companies and show initiative. If you see someone who doesn't have a social media presence or an online presence right now, you have the tools to do that. Reach out to them and say, let me help you. So show that you have that initiative, show that you can provide a service to them. They're going to be entering a job market that's even more competitive, so already starting to show that they have that tenacity is going to be really helpful.
Great, thank you. So Matthew, we're going to look post student life. With the pandemic and the economic situation, I'm seeing alumni. Some of them are giving more generously than ever before. Some are refocusing their giving locally. Some are pulling back entirely. What strategies have you and your fundraising team at William & Mary used this spring to both honor the uncertainty your donors feel and yet still keep gift funds flowing as you approach the end of the campaign?
Sure. So I'll say both engagement and philanthropy have required a much pivoted strategy, like everything else at the university. What we did immediately was begin to transition all of our programming from in-person gatherings to things like this, virtual gatherings. And we had already begun to transition all of our remote engagement to be much more thoughtful in terms of not just social gatherings, but really having a blend of intellectual, cultural, professional, and social gatherings. And so an online forum, a virtual forum, actually allows us to do that quite well. And we've tried to take the perspective of an 80-year relationship with our alumni. from the time you enter and matriculate as a freshman until you meet your maker. That's a long relationship with alma mater. And so we see that as a long-term opportunity for us to keep people deeply engaged. And over that time, we're going to have a lot of ups and downs in that relationship. We're going to have a lot of significant world issues, national issues, local issues, recessions, and problems along the way. And so with our fundraising, what we tried to do immediately was to make sure that our development officers were first and foremost calling to check in on our alumni and donors. We know that if we do our jobs well, we're maintaining strong relationships over the entirety of that 80-year relationship. So we took immediately to the phones and to Zoom to reach out and make sure that people were doing okay, check on them, and just have conversations. I'll tell you, I personally had some of the richest conversations with our friends during these last 2 months, because people were able to talk about not just what's happening in their jobs and their lives, but really to open up more fully and have deeper conversations. I think people are able to share much more fully now when you have something like this that really is across the globe, not just affecting one particular region. We are in the last month of our campaign, our For the Bold campaign. And so in some ways, we have not seen any real decline in our overall fundraising. I am not going to say we're there, but we have another 28 days to get to the finish line. What we are seeing, though, as you said, is donors really wanted to know how they can help most immediately. So many campuses like ours had emergency funds that were very quickly flooded with donations. We had just stood up last fall a new studio for teaching and learning innovation, which was really prescient when you think about the kind of transition our faculty have had to make in these last 3 months. And so that has been enormously helpful to have gifts coming in to support that. I think what we're all seeing is that gifts at the higher end of the pyramid, donors who have significant wealth and capacity are continuing to give, and they have the ability to continue to give. But at the broad bases, those donors who give participatory levels, the $100 gift, the $500 gift, the $1,000 gift, they are likely the ones who are most impacted right now by the pandemic and having the hardest time making gifts. So we continue to ask for people to support the things that are closest to them, but right now, unrestricted support is really one of the greatest gifts you can give to the university.
Sounds good. I had a little trouble unmuting. Thank you. Megan, can I follow up on something you said about you're getting alumni to offer internship possibilities and that sort of thing? Or do you sense that career offices are using alumni networks more than they used to?
Sure. So I think probably anyone who works in career services has this tagline that we always use, that network. That's the most important thing you can do as an undergraduate. There's these statistics about how many jobs are in this hidden job network. But now more than ever, that is going to be important for several reasons. So for students who are trying to figure out what they want to do, they have some time now. So that's another thing we've been encouraging students to do this summer, is do informational interviews with alumni, tap into them, figure out what your best next steps are. For figuring out where jobs are, knowing someone, having that connection is going to really be important, especially when companies may have freezes, and then when they do open, there's the applications are going to be flooded. But also, I think in my office, at least, we've seen we service students to alumni. We don't have any restrictions because we're small enough that we can, but we've gotten a lot of alumni have been in contact with us again because they have uncertainty in the job market. So it doesn't have to just be students who are going to be relying on that network. It's going to be other alums at this point. So very, very important.
Great, thank you. Allison, how did you all handle remote instruction in kind of more hands-on courses, or even as you're thinking about social distancing this fall, things like fine and performing arts or laboratories?
Well, it was difficult, honestly. We did our best with the mostly necessary courses for face-to-face. We were able to utilize our learning management system, as well as we use a Google platform. So we did a lot of Google Hangouts and Google Meet. For the performing arts and sciences, it was more difficult. We had some instructors who were able to mail lab kits to their students, and so they could do some of the lab work at home. What we've discovered is that, and I am not a technical person, but apparently there's a lag in some webcams that distorts music. And so if you're doing any type of an applied music lesson or trying to, combine musicians work together simultaneously, there's a certain camera that you need or a certain quality of camera. So we are planning for the future in case that's what we are going to need for this fall and ongoing. There has been some literature about airflow in terms of woodwinds and brass and singing that are going to make us rethink our ensembles and how and where they can practice and how many people can gather at once. So that's still under development for us. And so we're looking for outside information about what we can do safely when we return.
Super. Hey, Beth, can I follow up on, you said that Sweet Briar is unusually well situated to deal with some of the social distancing things. Tell me about how you're using that in terms of marketing or appeals to getting current students to come back or new students to matriculate.
Absolutely. So our small size really is to our advantage in this situation. We have about 650 beds on campus. So we have been able to offer a single room to every student who desires one. What was interesting is that we found with our students, when they responded to that offer, about a third are still asking for a double room, which we were a little surprised when an offer of a single at the double rate was put on the table. There are some students who still are excited about having a roommate. But for those who are truly concerned about the health concerns, then we're able to provide that for them. We're also able to offer a very small classroom setting that for even our classes that are a little on the larger side, which for us would be 20 students, we're able to move them to larger rooms and continue to social distance. We are also planning some hybrid models to where we would be able to accommodate students who aren't quite ready to return to campus. There are plans in place for testing for every student and every faculty and staff member on campus. And again, our size is a real advantage for that. Being on 3,250 acres, we've just been talking about how you can have your own space and your own place to explore. And even, my family and I have been here throughout the entire crisis, and we are, walking around campus and still able to get out and really enjoy our natural environments. So I think it's really appealing to students and to families to have that safe environment for their collegiate studies. And we've been getting some national attention for what we are able to provide. We've had several reporters on campus from the Chronicle and the Washington Post, and some additional articles are actually getting ready to come out in the upcoming days. So we actually have our largest incoming first-year class set right now in the last 3 years. So we're hopeful that this is actually going to work to our advantage at this time.
Thank you. So I'm going to take a few questions now that have come in on the question stream. So this is from Rachel Potter, who's the Dean of the College of Education at Mary Baldwin. And she writes, I'm curious how institutions are planning for barriers to community learning sites, things like fieldwork experiences for programs in teacher education, social work, counseling, healthcare. And particularly when those sites may not welcome our students as places, as those sites try to restrict visitors and only have non-essential personnel from the host location there. So for those of you who are involved in those kind of off campus experiences. How are you planning for that? Do you want to tackle that one, Allison or Maegan?
Sure, I'd be happy to. As far as placements for student teaching and internships and clinicals, we are really relying on the institutions themselves to give us guidance. We don't assume that our students are going to be able to return to their placements immediately. We're also following Commonwealth of Virginia guidelines and the Virginia Department of Health. So we want our students to be safe, but we also realize that our accrediting bodies require a certain number of hours in those placements. So it's kind of a fine line that we're walking, trying to meet the students' needs as well as the institution's needs. So in other words, it's a little up in the air at this point, but we're looking for more guidance in the next month.
Thanks. Maegan, did you want to chime in on that one?
I would just echo most of what Allison said. That has been a large concern for us too. I've been in lots of conversations with faculty members who require an internship as part of their major. And it's things like social work where it's hard to find a real substitute for the student not being there, student teaching the same. A lot of that learning happens on the ground. So as Allison said, I've just been in conversation with those employers, with those institutions, and sort of relying on them as they have more information. We have more information. I will say that this summer, following the governor's guidelines, we've had especially some healthcare employers open back up to interns. There's, of course, more training from the student. Whereas they were going over HIPAA and these different requirements before, they're having a whole online training about COVID and how to interact in those settings. So I think we'll see a lag, but I think we'll come around to have those students be able to experience those things.
Great, thank you. Matthew, I'm going to direct this one to you. There's a specific question about how is William and Mary planning to handle social distancing for students in the fall in classrooms and in dorms. And there's kind of a related question that's come in as well about how are we all considering human behavior as we talk about resuming classes? Are there ways to ensure physical distancing in terms of student socializing outside of class? So Matthew, I'll let you start with the William and Mary specifics, but then if there are other folks who'd like to chime in on that, I'd love to hear other perspectives.
Sure. I think this is one of the great challenges all of us who work on college campuses are facing, is that 18 to 22-year-olds by nature have a difficult time staying away from one another. And I think we've found with our students for sure here, but elsewhere, they really want to be together again. And that's part of what's driving the return to campus, is that there's a strong desire from students to have that in-person learning. We know also from research that the learning is accelerated in community. And so when students can come together, they're going to have much greater opportunity for learning. And how do you do that safely? I think what we're trying to work through, and the president has very ably enabled a thorough planning process on a much accelerated path to really work through how do we make sure we have a resilient curriculum, how do we make sure we have a resilient campus, and how do we make sure that we de-densify the campus to the extent possible. And so we don't have final answers to any of those, but we're looking at all the things that you would see from other campuses across the country. The school week could be longer. You could see Saturday classes again. Most campuses today have classes that run Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 to 3, and that's when every professor and every student wants to have their class. But I think we know we're going to probably need to have classes Monday through Saturday, and those classes will need to run from morning till night. I think for larger classes, you might envision the lectures being online and then discussion groups or labs taking place in person. I think you might find opportunities for team teaching, where one professor could be teaching from home and one could be teaching in person. So we're looking at all kinds of opportunities right now. The question around students is really the more challenging one. And I think getting students to adhere to social distancing, or at least to practice safer distancing and wearing masks and so forth. That's a big question we're working through as well right now, is how can you make sure that every student is wearing a mask? that every student is being tested on a regular basis. I think we, like everyone, are waiting for much more regular testing that would allow us to more safely bring people together. I think the focus we have right now, as you find on most campuses, is how do you return the academic core mission to taking place? Then how do you make sure you can bring people together safely? And then thirdly, how do you make sure that you can have some of those gatherings that are part of any college experience? And I think in that order that we're working through.
I would suggest that at the University of Lynchburg, we are developing a public health plan. And part of that public health plan is an education campaign that our communications and marketing office will be putting out to really bring home the point that masks are necessary and expected, and that, temperature checks may be part of your daily routine, as well as screening questions, and just to bring it home to not only students, but faculty and staff, that these are the expectations that you're agreeing to when you return to campus. So the education component, I think, is really important, not only in our curriculum, but in our return to campus.
Anyone else want to jump in on that one? So I want to raise a question that's come up that is rather broad, and it has to do with how universities are going to provide equitable and accessible education for all students, including those who are uncomfortable returning to campus or unable for personal reasons but want to continue their education. And this ties into some larger questions that we've been seeing in public discourse over the last few years about what is the value proposition for higher education. And I'd be curious for reactions from the group on that equity and access question.
I can start. So for us, this was an issue when we first moved remote, especially so quickly, with students left for spring break and had no idea they weren't coming back. So part of what we did to start with, I guess, one of the big hurdles of access was a lot of students don't have internet, don't have reliable internet to participate in Zoom meetings. So our IT department did a phenomenal job jumping on this right away. As Beth has mentioned, there is, in this case, a big plus for being such a small school that we could provide resources like hotspots and other resources to our students who needed that extra help with connectivity. Something else we've done we have a few summer classes that are online, and students who don't have access, we have opened up computer labs where they will be the only person there. So again, our size, we can really work to individualize the student experience. From the career services perspective here, this is a large concern, especially as internships and work remote. Not all of our students live in environments that are conducive to working remote. So trying to, again, work with employers to identify other ways that, that students can have that experience and still be able to thrive where they are. I think we will see a lot more of this rise to the surface, though, as this pandemic drags on.
I can add to that in the recruitment realm. We're starting to really consider the ramifications of students not having access to the SAT or the ACT testing. There are plans being, put in place. They're changing daily, weekly with the College Board. And we actually have an update this afternoon about some new changes, but they're already running into issues with signing up for a new summer SAT that's been added. So we're hearing from our students that come from, a family situation that may be disadvantaged for not having, really strong internet access, or even an environment that's conducive to being able to stay for an extended period of time online. And they're having a hard time signing up for an SAT because there's been delays. They're also, really concerned about not knowing if their institution of choice will accept them test optional in the fall or not. So there's a lot of anxiety on the secondary school side about what this is going to look like for next year and beyond, and how it will impact the students that come from a first generation or disadvantaged backgrounds. So I'm excited to hear more from the College Board and from testing agencies, and it'll be interesting to see over the summer what direction most colleges go. Do they go to a test optional policy just for this year? Are they looking longer term to going test optional past this year? And then there's also some discussion about, with California creating their own test, So on the small school side, one thing that we've started to talk about is if we don't have as many students taking an SAT or an ACT, how do we find out about prospective students to recruit? We purchase names from those testing agencies, and that's how we build a lot of our recruitment pools. So there's going to be a lot of discussion around what equity and access means and what these testing decisions mean for the long term for college admissions.
Beth, can I follow up quickly? There's a related question, not so much about tests, but are our institutions from an admissions perspective viewing applications differently because students' normal extracurriculars and academics were interrupted? I guess this is more of a prospective for the next cycle. Do you anticipate the admissions world is going to view seniors' applications next fall differently?
Absolutely. We've always taken a holistic approach to application review. And that usually means that we're spending, more attention on those extracurricular activities, those leadership opportunities. We even, can take into consideration if it's a student that comes from a family situation where employment or childcare in the home is an important part of how they're contributing. Then we take that into consideration in the application review. So application review will look different next year, and I anticipate for the next several years. And, the schools are going to have to start thinking about how do we know the continuation of curriculum throughout different high schools throughout the country as well. We're going to be putting greater emphasis, I think, even on the high school record and the transcript and looking at what opportunities that student had within his or her school. And then, comparing them to the other students within their situation and whether or not they've challenged themselves to the highest they can. So, we've always been doing that in college admissions, but it will look a little different in the future.
Thanks. Hey, Matthew, I'm going to toss a question to you now. Have you seen pressure from university leadership to ramp up current use fundraising efforts to make up for COVID-related losses or downturns in other income sources at the university?
No pressure, but we already in this campaign had been focusing on scholarships as our number one priority. The $1 billion goal has $350 million as our goal for scholarships. And I think we know that what's happening right now only exacerbates the family problems out there and the issues of paying for college. So we're putting even greater emphasis on scholarship support. But at the same time, we have seen unrestricted support grow over the course of the campaign, and we're continuing to emphasize the need for unrestricted support. I think we all have faced a decline at most college campuses for unrestricted support, particularly as millennials and Gen Z really tried to direct more intentionally their philanthropy. It really was Gen X and the baby boomers who were much more willing to give unrestricted support. But we have not seen a change in that yet. It may come to be, but we're continuing on with our priorities of scholarship support being our number one goal and unrestricted support being a very important one. But no, there hasn't been any additional pressure.
Thanks, Matthew. Anybody else care to chime in on that from your school's perspective? So I will. For the part of the university where I work, we have definitely had some conversations with donors who are close to us about shifting some of their giving to accelerate current use unrestricted cash. So folks who have a pledge due in December, same tax year, we've asked them if it's possible for them to accelerate that payment to June of this year. They would still be making one gift in their calendar year tax year, but it would accelerate the unrestricted cash coming in that the dean could use for the start of the academic year. And we've done a number of things like that to try to shift more funds into unrestricted use. Sorry, it's harder to answer a question and moderate at the same time. There's some questions related to COVID-19 testing. How often are we going to do it? Is there an upper limit on how many personnel are tested? Who's going to pay for that? I know some of you sit at the higher level decision-making points in your university. Who would like to talk a little bit about the kinds of ways you're thinking about that question?
I can start off, Ken. So the question has come up, should we test all students before they return to campus? And if when they return to campus, and if it's from a hotspot in the United States or overseas, should we require them to self-quarantine? And all indicators are that with the limited testing available as of today, that wouldn't be possible for us at Lynchburg. What we will hopefully do is have access to testing in the city of Lynchburg for students who are symptomatic, and then we can work with the Virginia Department of Health for contact tracing. So this is still under development as part of our public health plan, but we have partnered with the local hospital system and are working together to achieve that goal of testing. I think I saw a question about quarantine or self-isolation for 14 days upon return, rather than isolation for 14 days, which would really put a crimp in the whole orientation experience or the return to campus with classes starting. We're going to ask students to self-monitor, and that involves screening questions before they come back to campus, as well as exposure questions and potentially daily temperature checks. None of that is decided, by the way. All of that is still under development.
Who else would like to chime in on that one?
I'll just echo the challenge we all have, and this is not just in higher education, but it's the lack of testing. And I think we have heard from scientists in the field that there is a hope for a more readily available, cheaper test that would be available possibly by August, September, but it's again, nothing guaranteed. And so I think we're likely to have what Allison has described and what any of us have described. If you've gone to your dentist in the last couple of weeks, you have a series of questions you're asked in advance. There's probably someone that screens your temperature on a fairly regular basis, and much self-monitoring. But we just don't know. It's one of the things that we're all prayerful that will come through soon is much more frequent, cheaper testing that we can have available.
Thanks very much. So one of the challenges of being the moderator is seeing that there are way more good questions to answer than we have time for. We're at 10 minutes till the end mark, and so I want to be respectful of everybody's time and to thank all of the participants who offered questions, and please accept my apologies that we weren't able to ask all of them right now. I do want to wind up, though, with one question that feels important at this moment. And I'd like each of the panelists, if you would, to tell us what gives you hope right now.
I'll start, and I will share what's a pretty joyful experience that I have in working with donors, philanthropists who want to make a transformative experience. And it was probably the first week of the pandemic. I reached out to an alumna who is a trustee on our foundation board, just to talk with her, to have a conversation about how she's doing, what we're doing, how we're reacting. And she was the first to tell me that there are still many people like her who want to support and help the good work that's happening at William & Mary. And they want to be able to support in any way they can. And she made a $250,000 gift to support our emergency fund for students and our studio for teaching and innovation. And we've continued to talk, and we're talking now about an even more significant gift before the end of the campaign. But this served as one more reminder of the extraordinary generosity that exists and the spirit of helpfulness that exists among so many, even in these darkest days of both the pandemic and this continued national unrest related to the death of George Floyd and others. So it is a small sign of hope, but one that I think we need to look to, that there are still a lot of people out there wanting to do good and wanting to support our institutions of higher education. William & Mary, many of you will remember, we've been through 2 wars and 4 fires, and through 327 years, William & Mary has continued to survive and thrive. And so we continue to ring the Wren bell every day as a sign of hope that we will come through this as well, and we will emerge on the other side even more strong.
I feel very hopeful that our students really desire to be in community with each other, that all the research that we're seeing is that, you know, if given a choice between a remote learning environment and an on-campus environment, overwhelmingly, the research I'm seeing is 75 to 85% of students say, yes, I want to be on campus. And let's find a way to make that happen, because, you know, the remote learning environment hasn't worked as well for me in my, you know, senior year of high school. And I miss fellowship with friends. I miss the real connection I get from a mentor that works one-on-one with me in a classroom setting. And it's, you know, shown renewed excitement, I think, about what we all promote in the liberal arts and in a collegiate experience on campus. And I am encouraged that students are trying to find a way that we can make it happen for the fall, and they're supporting us in the uncertainty. You know, sometimes we've had some town halls and our answer is, we don't know yet. We're working on that. We're doing all the research we need to make sure to be safe when you return. Still is some uncertainty, and we've had great support from students and families in that uncertainty.
My hope comes from—
I think that, oh, sorry, Megan. I'm hopeful for a number of reasons, both with the support that Matthew offered, you know, suggested that our alums are giving. You know, we have for a particular recovery fund that our advancement office has launched. Beth has mentioned the excitement of all of the students returning to campus. I would say that it's not just the students that want to get back to the community, but the faculty and staff as well, and the community to come together and make things happen. I think that I'm hopeful because we have our May commencement rescheduled for October. So that will be a culminating event for all of us who have survived that spring semester. So I'm really hopeful that we will be able to come together again and move forward. There's also an opportunity for us to keep online learning as part of our curriculum in a broader way. I think that's an opportunity that may not have come fully realized if we hadn't been forced to. So there's the silver lining in the pandemic cloud.
So I was going to say my hope comes from our students also and from directly working with students. What I have noticed is even pre-pandemic that the generations of students now are not afraid to use their voices, and they do that in all ways. They are looking for jobs where the culture matches what they feel like is right. And since the pandemic and since the racial injustice in our country, I see that my students are using their voices for good, and they have many platforms to do that. They take to social media, they will take to, looking for a job, that they're able to use that voice for the greater good. So I think that our future is in good hands with our students, and they're able to speak up when they need to, and that's encouraging to me.
Thank you all. Well, let me wrap up with what makes me hopeful, and that is that no matter what issue we face, whether it's the science of COVID-19, the history of race relations, the politics of the moment, the role of social media in history and civic life, you name it, colleges and universities have something authoritative to say about it and a powerful role to play in our democracy, and that makes me hopeful. So thank you to all the panelists. Thank you, participants, for your great questions. And Tim, it's back to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone, again. Thank you, Ken, especially for leading this great conversation and for offering some opportunities for hope at the end, too. That was a great way to end this webinar. And of course, as Megan had mentioned before, the importance of networking remains kind of forefront for us. So if you have lasting questions, things that you want to discuss more with each of our panelists, feel free to connect with them on LinkedIn. Here again are their names and their respective universities and institutions for you to do so. But with that, thank you again, panelists, and thank you to everyone who joined us in the audience. And feel free to go to wmalumni.com to see more of our virtual engagement opportunities. So be well, everyone, and have a great afternoon.